Well, I think we've given 5 or 6 minutes of tolerance to this, to the beginning of this meeting. Let me just very briefly in Portuguese welcome the members of Parliament that are with us today. There are several of them sitting amongst you. Agradeço a vossa presença, senhoras e senhores deputados que estão aqui nesta conferência. I will switch immediately to English and basically to welcome, in addition, obviously, to the members of Parliament that are here, those of the European Parliamentary Technology Assessment institutions that have joined us today in Lisbon. It's raining, but I think sun will come out every now and then, so it's not the usual weather we have at this time. We had some very hot weather very recently, but let me just say that we have representatives from Austria, from Belgium, from Catalonia, from Denmark, from Germany, from Norway, from Spain, from Portugal, the Netherlands, the UK, and the United States of America. So for all of you who are here, both permanent members of EPTA and associate members, thank you very much for spending part of your day, afternoon with us. Some of you have come from a long way away, so I'm very grateful that you're here. We have also invited, in addition to all the members of Parliament from Portugal, we've invited a number of institutions who are here with us today. The Academy of Sciences of Lisbon, whose president is with us today. The Portuguese National Innovation Agency, who was with us this afternoon, and I think he may be here now. The National Council for Science, Technology and Innovation, who may be sending a representative to be with us. The Council of Rectors of the Universities of Portugal and of the Polytechnic institutions. Several institutions that have some experience in this kind of work. At universities and at other centers, the Center for Studies of Social Studies from Coimbra, the Faculty of Engineering from Porto, an institute that studies fundamental particles, whom we never know, we may need fundamental particles at some point. The Institute for Technology, Chemistry and Biology, the FCT, the Order of the Engineers, Nokia, and several other people have been invited. I'd like to thank their presence here, as well as some former members of Parliament who were also invited and who said would be with us, like Professor Paulo Trigo Pereira, who used to be a member of Parliament, is very interested in this topic, and but is no longer. He works at the High Institute for Economics and Management. I would like now to thank Professor António Muniz, who's with us today, for making this possible. He unfortunately broke his arm, which I'm sure is not very pleasant. So we are with you, Antonio, but you were the one who made the meeting of the EPTA in Lisbon possible, and it was that actually made it also an attempt to have you come to Parliament to tell us a little bit of the work that you do and the kind of work that you do. I'd also like to thank Marta Candeias, who is somewhere. There she is. She's been helping also in a lot in getting this meeting possible, both within Parliament and outside of Parliament. So thank you, Marta, for being here with us. And before I pass the word to Antonio, let me say just very briefly why I think it was important to use this opportunity of having you all in Lisbon why I think it's important for you to come and tell us in Parliament the kind of work that you do, the kind of impact that you have. And the answer is actually very simple. I think every parliamentarian in the world, I hope, would like to say that the legislation that gets drafted and gets passed by their parliaments is based on knowledge, on the most robust, on the most transparent knowledge existing that includes and makes sure that dialogue is fundamental between different domains of knowledge, but also with the public, with institutions that have that knowledge, and with the stakeholders. So it's, I think, probably something that we all aspire to. Sometimes we get very close to it. I hope we get closer and closer to it, but I think that's the main reason. And the meeting today will also provide some evidence of the many ways in which that can be achieved. You know, there are a variety of mechanisms, a variety of structures, a variety of organizations that do this. And we would like to understand how you do it, each one of you, because you're all different, the instruments and the networks that you use in doing this kind of work, and the sort of impact that your work has on the legislation that you pass. Some countries have a longer history of these types of structures, but others are actively implementing these bodies. And EPTA now, if I'm not mistaken, is made up of 26 countries and regions that involve this. The debate is not new, even in our parliament. The idea of having a structure in our parliament that could address these issues was launched in 2009, so that's 14 years ago. And we've been digesting and rethinking and putting our efforts together in order for this to be possible, to see how in Portugal we could have a mechanism, and you'll see that the mechanisms are very diverse, how we could have a mechanism possible in Portugal. So on that point, I thank you all again for being here. I thank, in particular, all the members of Parliament that were able to be with us today, all your travels to Lisbon, and I will pass immediately the word to António Muniz, who will tell you a little bit, I think, about the EPTA in this context. António?
Ok. Muito obrigado. Muito obrigado a todos os presentes por estarem aqui nesta conferência. My name is, vou mudar para inglês, my name is António Muniz, and I'm the head of the Observatory of Technology Assessment that is inside a research center, one of the largest research centers of social sciences in Portugal, financed by the National Foundation for Science and Technology, that is the Interdisciplinary Center for Social Sciences. And this, as director, I was also the coordinating, the founder of the PhD program on technology assessment since 2009. And since then, we were approaching the parliament in Portugal. And then for several years, we were involved in different activities, mainly related with some audiences at the parliament, and as well providing the outcomes of our research. The main activities in Portugal, as Professor Quintanilha mentioned, are not developed inside the parliament, because Portugal was, well, until to 2016, the only the country that has no representation at the EPTA organization. But from then, we have this associate partner. The intention is to have a unit that brings Portugal as a full partner from EPTA. EPTA exists, has a light structure and exists since 1990. Especially started from the European Parliament when the President Baron Crespo was the head of the Parliament, and since then there were some years went by. Had always a light structure, but a very efficient one. Is guided by the EPTA Council. EPTA Council has a steering committee of the EPTA network and includes the members and representatives of each of the organizations that belong to this EPTA. In early stages, there were mainly members from Europe, but nowadays there is a wide expression of backgrounds from United States to Korea, Japan, and many other countries, also from South America. We usually have meetings of directors of this EPTA partner organization once per year, and a conference with the council meeting as well once per year. And this year, the presidency has been held by Catalonia and by the CAPCIT, that is the organization at the Catalonia Parliament. And the idea to organize this practitioners meeting in Portugal was also an attempt to coordinate several activities in the Iberian Peninsula. This practitioners meeting that we have now, the presidency of the European Council that as the support from the Oficina C from Spain, from Madrid, and the presidency of the EPTA organization that is from CAPCIT. And with this, I give the floor to my colleague, Clara Marsan from CAPCIT, to tell you about their experience from Barcelona. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that we have we don't have a presentation, direct presentation from CAPCIT on the screen, but I think we have Clara Roventos with us from CAPCIT. Maybe she could add a few words. There's a document that she sent which will be distributed amongst those that are present in the audience. So, Clara, the floor is yours.
Muito obrigada. Boa tarde. Good afternoon, members of Parliament and colleagues of the EPTA network. Yes, as the President mentioned, I opted for a non-PowerPoint presentation, so I wanted to speak to you directly without slides, but I thought it was nice to have a document that you could refer to meanwhile I was speaking or later on to pick up on different issues that I will tell you about. So my name is Clara Marsan, and I'm a legal advisor here at the Parliament of Catalonia, Parliament of Catalonia, where I'm also the secretary of CAPCIT, the Parliament's Advisory Board on Science and Technology. And as it was already mentioned by Antonio Moniz, this year, 2023, the Catalan Parliament, through CAPCIT, holds for the second time the presidency of EPTA. so the European Parliamentary Technology Assessment Network. That's the reason why I'm here today. I will speak on the one hand as a representative of the EPTA network, and later on I will speak on behalf of CAPCIT, so as the CAPCIT secretary. I was asked to tell you a little bit about EPTA, so to situate you on the network. Although I have to say, I have heard already some of the most important points highlighted by the president, by Antonio Moniz. So thank you very much, because I think this builds on the strong points of EPTA. So I will try not to be repetitive. And I will start with what Antonio Moniz mentioned about the light organizational structure. Indeed, EPTA is not formal association. It is a network between peer institutions that share a common goal: scientific and technology advice to parliaments. As of today, EPTA counts with 25 members. Some are full members, some others are associate members. What's the difference? Well, for a full membership, 5 requirements are asked. So the first thing is to operate in Europe. If that's not the case, one can still apply for associate membership. Another one is that this institution is devoted to technology assessment or related activities. This is a requirement. So either for full membership or associate membership, this has to be proved. The council, as I will tell you about later on, is the one deciding on new memberships, and hence at a given council, the decision has to be taken on whether an institution has proved that is actually devoted to technology assessment. Another important point that has to be, let's say that has to be in the organization of any full member or associate member is that this organization serves the parliament. This has also to be proved and evaluated by the council. And then we have 2 more requirements that are for full members, but that are not compulsory. So one is to have its own budget and secretariat, but without it, one can apply for associate membership. And a final one regarding the need to have competence regarding issues with a scientific and technological component. That's also not required for an associate membership. As we have already heard this afternoon, as you will probably have heard this morning, EPTA members work in very different manners. And I think that's one of the very nice things of EPTA. We work very well together, we share a goal, but we have our different ways to organize, to structure, to deliver our work. And so I think that's very enriching, because we learn from each other, and we even when find interesting things in other ways of doing, we try to adapt it maybe, to include it. So that's one of the very nice things of EPTA, I think. As you will see, some members are a body of parliament, such as CAPCIT. So it's a body that is parliamentarian in nature, such as a committee, let's say. In other institutions, is external to parliament. The relationship to parliament may be more or less autonomous. So I will talk about CAPCIT later on, and I guess every institution will tell a bit more about these differences that we have among us. What happens when one is a EPTA member? So what is expected from EPTA membership? To take part on EPTA meetings and events. I will tell you a bit more later, and Antonio Moniz already highlighted some of the events. To strive for taking part in EPTA projects. So much of our work is within the national context or regional context, but there are also much, let's say, ways that we could work together within the network. So that would be at the level of EPTA projects. to contribute to the EPTA information activities, so they are always up to date, and of course to take over a presidency when it's required, because since it's a light organization and there are no obligations, we encourage each other to once in a while take the presidency and its responsibility. So what about these different highlights that are organized by the EPTA network? We have the EPTA Council. It's where the full members are meet annually. Non-full members are invited as well, although they are not part of the decisions that have to be taken. The council discusses all EPTA business, and it's the formal body of EPTA, taking all decisions that are needed. And it usually meets once a year, but of course it can meet more often than that. These years, as I will tell you about later on, the presidency is the one in charge of organizing these meetings. So this year, the council meeting was in Barcelona, the 9th and 10th of October. And so it was, it is really an Iberian technology assessment time, because we are going from the council to the practitioners with very, very few days between one and the other. So I think that's nice too. A second event that is organized by the presidency that takes place every year is the directors meeting. The directors meeting is the meeting of the so-called directors of these institutions. Each institutions provide a name for that director, president, secretary, but it's the person in charge to run that office, secretariat, institute. They meet in a smaller context, let's say the council meeting. We find directors, but also MPs. At the directors meeting, usually it's a more technical meeting, let's say, and the directors are the ones present there. And they discuss also the business, let's say, of EPTA. And they start looking for topics for the conference, for instance. They coordinate, they talk about what they do at each institution, we exchange. So that's pretty much the summary of it. A third milestone, let's say, a third moment, and for me the milestone of the EPTA meetings is the EPTA conference. That is usually organized together with the council. So we had the EPTA conference in Barcelona the 9th of October. This year the conference was about generative artificial intelligence. It was a very fruitful day. It was really good. And why I say that it's a milestone, it's the place where really members of parliament meet. And that's a very strong part of it. Let's say during the year, directors, practitioners exchange in a quite often base, whereas MPs do not share that often. And I think the EPTA conference is the perfect venue where parliamentarians not only share with scientifics and technology experts, but they also share with their peers, their parliamentarians from other parliaments that are members of the EPTA. So I think that's also a very important day that we have in our year events, year EPTA events. Finally, a few words about the presidency. So it's a light organization, decisions are taken in the council, and hence who is supervising and organizing the year events that I just mentioned is the presidency that rotates each year. So last year, the presidency was by the German Bundestag. This year's the Catalan Parliament, next year's the Norwegian Parliament, and so on and so forth. So the presidency chairs the council meeting, the directors meeting, the annual conference. It represents EPTA externally, so that's why I'm here today. It fosters international cooperation and exchange, etc., etc. So I think that would be the overview of the structure of EPTA. I don't know at this point if you would like to talk about it or have questions and answers, or should I shift to Capsit?
Thank you very much, Clara. I think we will now move on to some of the presentations with specific cases that were being dealt in a variety of different countries. And I think after these cases have been presented, then we'll open up, if the audience agrees, we'll open up to questions and need for clarification. The idea is that we'll have short presentations of about no more than 15 minutes each. If it can be shorter, even better, on specific topics. And the first one, I'm going to ask Miltos Ladikas, who is here on a double representation from Germany and also from the European Parliament. And I will give him the floor. I think your presentation will come up very soon. You can use the microphone. There is a little object there so that you can pass your slides. And thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much also for having this dual role of talking to us about an interesting interaction between two organizations. Miltos.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'm also very glad to be here. Just in terms of introduction, I come from the Institute for Technology Assessment and Systems Analysis in Germany, which is actually, I have my back to you, I'm sorry, which actually runs TAB, which is the German Parliament's Technology Assessment Bureau. And TAB is not able to come here. I say TAB because, of course, I'm part of ETAS, but TAB is a very specific group of people that work for the Parliament and nothing but the Parliament, as I told you before. I will be able to answer a lot of questions, but here I have more my European hat. And the European hat is the following. I'm coordinating a group of not just parliamentary, but technology assessment institutes in Europe that have a contract to work for the European Parliament. This 5-year contract that we already have for 20 years now. So we do quite a few reports for the European Parliament. And as a kind of last-minute addition, I think, I was asked to say something about that. So here I will represent that group, the ETAC group, as it is called. And ETAC works occasionally for STOA. That's the panel for the future of science and technology of the European Parliament. STOA stands for Science and Technology Options Assessment. That was the original title at the European Parliament. That's important because it was all about options and assessing new policy options. There is also a bit of a story which I will not tell you now, but it moved towards becoming the panel for the future of science and technology, but the work is more or less the same. So in this particular case that I will very briefly talk to you about, just to give you an idea of what we consider to be the impacts of our work. I will refer to the particular report we did some years ago on tackling deepfakes in European policy. That work was led by our colleagues at the Rathenau Institute, with us as coordinators and also as members, and also the Fraunhofer Institute for System and Innovation Research in Germany, and also Technology Center of the Academy of Science in the Czech Republic. You have to keep in mind that that's important because everyone is talking about AI nowadays and ChatGPT, and there have been congregational hearings about that. There have been our parliamentarians and also all very much worried and want to talk about it. But those times, it was the times that was late 2020, at the time when we were discussing in Europe about the AI Act. There was still a kind of hot discussion in Europe, but no one even expected to have a generative AI big explosion like we saw nowadays. So now it has become much more knowledgeable to everyone, but at those times it was a quite new thing to discuss about deepfakes. We'll have to. Where's the computer? There?
Clara, your microphone is still on. Can you turn it off?
Am I? So first of all, at those times, we need to define deepfakes. We all have an idea what deepfake is, but what is actually a deepfake? So I will not go through that. I only have a few minutes. You can read it out. You can see some examples of those times that have been used to combine, let's say, famous faces to very realistic outputs. Those times, the deepfakes, you could tell that it was a deepfake. You cannot tell anymore, actually. But those times, it was relatively easy to tell that it was a deepfake. So you can see how we defined deepfakes, and the idea is that here, and that turned out to be the truth, that the machine learning, deep learning aspect of the deepfake was actually something that one had to put particularly attention to, and it was also the focus of our definition. So we had to do a TA study. This is the outline, more or less, in a very short way. We had to look at the societal context of deepfakes. Actually, what the effect of deepfakes will be in society, and how society can be, based what the implications, let's say, for the different societal groups might be. And for that, we need to have a clear structure of the benefits, risks, and the impacts of deepfakes. We look at the current regulatory landscape. Those times it was the AI Act at the European level. We look at the regulatory gaps, and then we provide policy options. And this is a very standard TA. That was a kind of short TA study. By the way, it was 6 months for you, for those of you that you're not aware of how long a TA report might take. A standard tab, the German Parliament report, will take 2 years, actually. The Parliament wants something faster. Of course, not in such a great depth. So that was a 6-month study. We looked at the benefits, actually. We categorized the benefits that we found. And of course, the production, actually, the idea of the design, the online design and the graphic design aspect is, of course, a benefit of that. You can do many more things also in terms of human-machine interactions that can be applied in many different fields. That's something that one has to acknowledge on the deepfakes. From education, which is not exactly here, but medical research has been also something that from the beginning was a very important and beneficial aspect of deepfakes. Some things that people did not think of in a great detail, but not only video conferencing that allows a kind of realistic depiction. 2020, that was the COVID time. We started using Teams for the first time, and that was very crude, still is in a way, but anyway. And on satire, actually, that use it is not simply to do something, to tell people to say something bad, but something also funny that can be used, and so on and so forth. Mainly artistic and creative expression. But, of course, our biggest interest, and also for the policy makers, is the whole risk associated with deepfakes. So we suggested a categorization of risk on the psychological harms, financial harms, and societal harms, as we call them. You can see here, and of course you can read, of course, in our report in details how we, what exactly harms we think that deepfakes are about, and where our policies should focus upon. I won't go through each one of them, but you can easily see that some of it has already been happening, as a matter of fact, and it's happening every day nowadays. Every day you hear news about some of these harms becoming true out of deepfakes. So how to do a kind of cascading impacts of deepfakes, where we start from the individual level to the organizational or the group level to the whole kind of societal level. So this is a kind of approach, a risk assessment approach for deepfakes. We identified regulatory gaps, and that's important, actually, to look at where the regulations cover the risks that we associate with the deepfakes. We found out that, yes, we have regulations that victims are protected well on paper, but as a matter of fact, they need a lot more support to claim their rights in order to bring cases on board. Our current regulation is not, let's say, amenable to it. It does not help, actually, individuals. But also we have to recognize that there is multiple actors involved in deepfakes. And, that works, okay. We provided this kind of categorization for that. We should look at it from the point of view of the victim, but also the perpetrator, actually. What's the target audience for the deepfake? Who is providing technology for it? And also quite important, the platform users and the platform services themselves that have to be targeted in the regulatory options for EPTA. So we found there is a lot of competing rights and obligations amongst these actors. It's not clear. There is a lot of gray area that needs to be covered. And also have to deal with the idea that a lot of perpetrators act anonymously, and they stay anonymous. It's not easily to identify the perpetrators of deepfakes, and that platforms play a pivotal role. Now everyone is going after platforms, but it wasn't clear at the time because we still don't have the Digital Services Act, as you will see. So these are the dimensions quickly that the regulatory aspects should take. So we have a technology dimension, creation dimension, circulation, targeted audience. We think that each one of them should be a separate focus of policy in the area of deepfakes. And we provided options. So according to the dimensions that I gave you before, some technology dimensions, and you can see it here that we concentrate on the AI framework. As a matter of fact, we did have a specific suggestion that to regulate deepfake technology as high risk. That has been taken up, by the way. Still, I remind you, that was the times when there was early discussions, not early, but still, a lot of discussions between the Parliament and the Commission about the AI Act. And also we need to look at the creation of the dimension to clarify the guidelines for labeling. Labeling is a very important issue. I have the impression that it's become even more important, actually, how to label deepfakes and how to catch deepfakes that are not labeled as such. But at the time, we also had some suggestion for the Digital Services Act, because platforms should have more responsibility on how deepfakes are created and distributed, well, particularly distributed, of course. And we shouldn't let them off the hook, which they would be very happy to be, of course, off the hook. And this has also developed towards the dimensions that we suggested here, and what kind of obligations we think that the platform should have, and so on and so forth. You can read that again in detail. So, in summary, what such kind of even short study could do for the Parliament, let's say. First of all, we provide information on the state of arts. I mean, parliamentarians, like everyone else, they have limits to what they know, what they can know, and how much time they have to know these things. So they need accurate, independent information and knowledge about the state of art, so that we can increase the awareness about the problem and what the outreach of the problem is. It takes time, actually, to realize really what's actually where the problem lies. And for us, of course, in the terms of what we did for STOA, because we're required specifically to do that for STOA, is to look at the current regulations and provide policy options. That's a very, very key thing. And as I said, the policy options that we provided, okay, it's our own interpretation, but I believe that if you talk with some the STOA people, you see that actually they really took it seriously, and it became part of their talk. The amendments they suggested to the Commission and I believe eventually even the final outcome of the AI Act. So this was one stone, but an important stone as well in this debate. So eventually, we try to do that, establish a new regulation. We don't do that, of course. Parliamentarians do that. They should do that. They should be the only ones that have this responsibility to do that. But we'll be very happy if you can provide a good analysis, good knowledge, and some policy options that they can consider and perhaps even take up. And I think that we did that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Miltos. Thank you for providing us in such a short time with the overview of the kind of work that you do. I would now like to ask Thijs Sikma. Yes. Did I pronounce it correctly? From the Rathenau, almost close.
With T in front of it, like
Here is the. If you move. Thank you. He's from the Rathenau Institute. Thijs.
No? Ah, that's better. Yeah, okay. Yes. Hello everyone. My name is Thijs Sikma. I'm from the Rathenau Institute, which is in the Netherlands, the Parliamentary Technology Assessment Institute. I've been worked there for 5 years now, and I'm sort of giving an introduction about what we do, our structure, our relation to our parliament, the topics we have, and the impact, examples of impact, and I will try to keep it short and simple. Next one. So the structure of our organization is very much formed by our history. And it's, as you can see, we're a relatively old institution, especially in relation to parliamentary technology assessment, and we're also relatively well respected because of that. And I think it started in the 1978 with a parliamentary commission, which was set up because of the developments in microelectronics. And I think even then that already shows sort of the impact which we had, because that report already led. It was basically about the first computers, personal computers, and what the impacts that would have with regard to employment and the growth of inequality. And the report that this commission published, it led to a lot of symposia and debates. And it also led to sort of a national agenda in the Netherlands about computers, which is still has been still very influential with regards to the use of computers in high schools and that kind of stuff. So that's already at the start. I think it's nice to see this agenda setting function. In 1968, the name was changed to the Dutch Organization for Technology Assessment. So it really got a broader task. We were like really officially founded. Then we changed the name, Rathenau Institute. And as of 2005, we added also science system assessment to this task. And I'll give more details sooner or later about these different tasks, how they relate to each other. This is sort of our founding document. And here it says, I can imagine you cannot read Dutch, so I will translate it. The Institute has the task to contribute to the societal debate and political judgment forming with regard to topics which are related to scientific and technological developments, whereof ethical and societal and cultural and legal aspects of these. So an important thing to note here is that we both want to contribute to the judgment forming, so we don't really give specific advice or you have to do this or that. It's more about making sure that the politicians are informed about what is at issue. Another aspect is the societal debate, which is also an integral part of us, and so which is about organizing debates about this technology, which can also be very helpful for politicians. And so they know, okay, what do different people expect or fear with regard to new technology. So this is sort of an integral part of our institution. And another thing we sort of made red is that we in particular contribute to this political judgment in the Parliament and into the European Parliament. So we're not exclusively working for a Dutch Parliament. Basically, we're sort of working for like society as a whole, that's sort of our mandate. But in particular, we give like advice to this Parliament, and this is also sort of built into how we are financed. We get like a regular amount each year, the same amount of money, and we can ourselves also determine partly which projects we want to undertake, and we do this based on public values. So that's basically when we think that public values, which are, for instance, privacy, sustainability, safety, things which are sort of generally is consensus about society, when they are at issue, that gives us sort of the mandate to do research into that, to organize dialogues about it, or to trying to clarify what's going on also for politicians. Yes. This is sort of an overview about the themes we have. This is of our work program, and so this mandate from society itself is also reflected in our work program, because our work program is developed every 2 years, also with contributions and sort of from different stakeholders. So we're trying really to find out, okay, what's at issue here, and so to really connect to society itself. And for the work program of 2023 and 2024, the themes are digitalization, climate and health, and knowledge for transitions. And it's basically we have sort of a transition to look more at the societal transformations, and then look at how technology and science can help with that. It's also sort of a interesting development, I think. And also that which is also informed by our science system assessment, which is basically about, okay, how do the science system, how does it function? For instance, we publish reports about the investment in R&D in the Netherlands, or with regard to trust in science in the Dutch society. And as you see again, it's both research and dialogue. So it's sort of perhaps a bit of broader mandate than other parliamentary technology assessment institutes. This is a good example, I think, both with regard to our impact as with regard to the different strands and how they are combined. This was a European part of a European consortium, Origin 2020. I forgot to tell this, but besides the financing we get every year from the Ministry of Science and Education, we also try to acquire finance through other means, for instance, like research projects, for instance, Horizon projects. And we try to get this like at 20% of our budget. But with an important but is that these projects, they have to be within our main aims, which I were a few slides back at. It has to contribute to this forming of the judgment of politicians and for society and public values. So that's sort of the important caveat. So this is an example of a European study. It was with 10 other research institutes, and it was about the relation between the precautionary principle and innovation. I think now 6 years ago, and it was commissioned also by the European Commission, because at that time there were sort of questions about this precautionary principle and to what extent this principle could hamper innovation. And the project was about sort of finding out if that's the case, and in what cases that would be, and how the precautionary principle could be better applied to foster innovation. And precautionary principle is basically the principle that when in doubt, better safe than sorry. So in the case of scientific uncertainty, then it's important that the government can have is allowed to act, even if risks are uncertain. But the idea was, according to some, that this would hamper innovation, technological progress. And one of the few outcomes of the project was that, in the cases we sort of researched, that didn't seem that much the case. It seemed like even this precautionary principle, which is like a general principle in European law, seemed to have sort of more steered different technologies more in a sort of societally acceptable direction. For instance, with regard to nanotechnology and green nanotechnology. So we sort of, our main advice was that this precautionary principle should not only be seen as sort of only a safeguard, but can also be used as a sort of a compass, sort of to direct different companies and makers of innovation to develop technology in a societally acceptable way. And with regard to impact, it's difficult to measure, but we had like the explicit aim was to also make policy briefs. So we regularly made policy briefs during this project, and we also had like sort of final conference in which a lot of European agencies, like the European Environmental Agency, the European Food Safety Authority, and also from the Commission itself are present. And what was interesting that during the time there was also, partially perhaps because of this project, a sort of a shift within the European Commission in seeing this technological innovation only as an aim in itself, but more as something which could be steered better with regard to precaution. And I think this helped in that. We got like very positive feedback of the different institutions which were present. Do I have more time or 3 minutes? I can. That's a colleague of mine who's sitting over there. This is more an example of an impact we had in the Dutch Parliament, which is about the role of data in like a very important law in the Netherlands with regard to the energy transition. And she spoke directly in Parliament about this. And that's maybe also very good to say, is that we have like specific instruments to make sure that our research is really picked up by our Parliament. For instance, we have a parliamentary liaison, which is a person or even two who have like the only task is to make sure that the research is also picked up by the parliaments, and they really try to follow. Okay, which are the parliamentary discussions, and when can we present which report? Another thing we do is sort of write these short briefings also for Parliament. And maybe for a final thing, I think the most important with regard to our impact is also that we're independent, and that's very much liked by the different politicians, because especially with regard to science and technology, there are many stakes at play, and there are many information sources, so they really find it helpful that then there is sort of an independent institution with an explicit independent mandate to advise them on this, and specifically also on these, for instance, the public values, to sort of show, okay, these things are at issue, and also to not give like direct advice, but more give, okay, these are maybe the options, and these options have these different values are there at issue. I think that's the most important. I'll look to my colleagues. I think that's about it. Yes. So thanks. Yeah.
We now move across the Atlantic, and I'd like to ask Sarah Harvey, who's with us, still suffering from a little bit of jet lag, but you're welcome. Please tell us your story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Sarah Harvey, and I've come over from the United States to talk about the Government Accountability Office, our role in technology assessment, and how that impacts legislation in our country. GAO, for those of you who don't know, is an independent, nonpartisan professional services agency. This means that we are very protective of our status of not aligning with any particular party, but instead being very neutral in terms of the political message, but also very accurate and very fact-based. If you come to the United States and hear our Comptroller General speak, he will emphasize these points many times because it's an important part of the function that we provide. We know that the Congress uses our work extensively to identify legislative solutions to all types of emerging problems, including cost savings and also enhancing federal programs and determining where we spend our money. In 2019, a specific team within the GAO was formed, and we focus on technology assessment explicitly. We are called the Science and Technology Analytics Team. This just really means that we encompass all things that have to do with science review, including programmatic reviews, a special focus on technology assessment, and we also have a group that looks at data analytics. We have a big portfolio. And we could talk all day about that, but the technology assessment that I'll talk about today has to do with sustainable chemistry. We employ scientists as part of our assessments. Many of these have PhDs in degrees as diverse as neuroscience to aeronautical engineering to microbiology. Personally, I focus on the biomedical portfolio, but that certainly doesn't diminish the work that our physicists and our astronomers do. I provided a few quotes here from some articles about our team. Maybe the one in yellow is the most interesting. One of the PhD scientists said, once you publish a report at the GAO, you know you can get that research on a congressional desk and potentially affect what bills get passed and see a real impact of your work, which I think is one of the advantages for what we do. So today I'll talk to you about our sustainable chemistry technology assessment. For this one, the congressional members asked us to take on the technology assessment in this area. I think some others have spoken about how the work starts. For us, often the members ask explicitly for work on a certain topic, although it is possible for us to start work on our own if we think something is important. We are very careful not to play the role of the lawmaker, but instead the purveyor of sound, reliable, and independent information. So our sustainable chemistry TA, some of the information we put out can be a little bit lay-friendly because we want people to observe this information and to take it in. So in this one, we put out some information about your love bug, about Valentine's Day, and how that might relate to sustainable chemistry. While the article was light, the work in the technology assessment was not. Our methodology on this one included 2 full days of an expert meeting with individuals from academia, industry, and a variety of nonprofits. We also had over 80 interviews with a wide variety of stakeholders, and we conducted a survey of 27 different chemical companies to better understand what was going on in this space. Our teams vary in size, but this work was mostly conducted by in between 3 and 5 people, usually a project manager with a few scientists, aided by a communications analyst to help with the writing, and graphic designers. As you can see, we have some pretty good graphics. So the intention is to provide lawmakers with sound information on how the policy is relevant. So I'll boil this whole report down to 3 main points. One, that stakeholders did not agree on how to define, measure, or assess sustainable chemistry. We also found that companies weighed various environmental and health factors differently when they assess sustainability. And that's what this piece here is. It shows you how the different companies valued things differently, which can be a bit of a challenge. And lastly, we found that these differences hindered the development of the technology and the adoption of the technology. I don't know if you know, but sometimes making laws and making changes can take a lot of time. So we actually issued this work, and then about a year later, we're called back to Capitol Hill, to the meeting of our lawmakers, where we did a testimony on this topic. Specifically, we testified to the Congress, and this opened up the discussions on this area again. And at that point, our staff started having numerous closed-door conversations with all types of lawmakers who had questions. They wanted more information about how this worked. A lot of times, this focused on some of our key findings, like the fact that sustainable chemistry wasn't defined in the United States, and it wasn't clear what that meant. And I'm sure you know that it's really hard to write a law if you're not sure exactly what you're talking about. We also looked at the fact that a number of government agencies and entities were involved in sustainable chemistry, but our findings were that they weren't always coordinated. That can be a common finding across our GEO reports, and this was a big effort. And so instead of making recommendations to a particular entity, we felt that it was important for them to consider the issue more globally. And as a result, our Congress enacted legislation, and several provisions related to sustainable chemistry in this act were pretty darn close to what was in our technology assessment. And that's not surprising given how many questions and how extensively we worked on the topic. The legislation specifically enabled mechanisms to coordinate across our government and all the entities, and they addressed some of the challenges we identified, like the lack of a definition and other things. As a result of this work and the act that our Congress passed, we feel like a national transition to a more sustainable chemistry technology was advanced through lawmaking, and I think this provides an example of how that impact can be measured directly, as opposed to some of the more nuanced impacts that our work will also have. I'm happy for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, now we move to come back to Clara Raventos from CAPCIT. Clara, the floor is yours.
Muito obrigada. As you mentioned before, I had provided you with a document. The document is about this part of my talk, about CAPCIT. So if you refer to the document, you will have the structure of what I will tell you about. Well, why the Catalan Parliament has a specific body to provide science and technology advice? In 2008, so 15 years ago, Parliament noted that, of course, science and technology was going at a very high speed. Parliamentarians did not have the specific knowledge, neither parliamentary staff, and the communication between the legislature and the scientific community could be enhanced. So that's the reason why at that time the Parliament established the Advisory Board of the Parliament of Catalonia for Science and Technology, CAPCIT, which is responsible for providing information and advice on scientific and technology issues to parliamentarians. This information, and this is one of the basic elements of our system, is that it's delivered by experts. So it has to be up to date, excellent, provided by someone that we know has a very good overview on the subject. It has to be clear and concise. We started in 2008 with policy briefs and projects that were very extensive pieces of research, and we actually saw that that was very difficult to take from the part of the legislator. So during the last couple of years, we have shifted to very brief studies and policy briefs that have to be very clear, very concise, if possible, with other supports such as podcasts that accompany 10-minute podcast, or diagrams and other ways of providing a very quick input as well. And the third element of this information, it has to be neutral and impartial. That's also very important, because that's the nature of this body. It has to provide information for the Parliament with all its richness, with all its political views. So any information that is delivered from this body has to be neutral and impartial, and that's also something we work very hard on it. How does actually CAPCIT works? Well, the body is with a mixed composition. So it's the only parliamentary body that has this mixed composition. This means that we have, on the one hand, one parliamentarian that represents each parliamentary group. So this ensures plurality. This ensures neutrality, because there's no suspicions that the information might be recommended by a given party or another. So we have representatives from each member, each parliamentary group. And at the same time, we have external members. This means that the different representatives from the scientific and technology expertise in Catalonia are represented. So public universities, private universities, the Catalan Institute of Studies, the Catalan Foundation for Research and Innovation, the Catalan Council for Scientific Communication, the Royal Academy of Science and Arts in Barcelona, or the Catalan Association for Research Institutions. Another important thing regarding the structure that I think it's nice to highlight is that the role of the CAPCIT is composed by the President of the Parliament, the two Vice Presidents of the Parliament, and one member of the Parliament Bureau. This means that the steering wheel of CAPCIT is at the highest level. It's steered by the President of the Parliament itself. So this is also a very important element, because it gives this body, let's say, a quicker path to communicate with the different committees and the different parliamentary groups. CAPCIT meets at least twice a year, but it has no limit on its settings. And it has a permanent secretariat that is composed by a secretary that is a legal advisor at the Parliament, which is now myself, and other staff from the Parliament of Catalonia, such as Elna Roig, who is sitting among of you. And since 2023, we also have a traineeship program that we signed with all science and technology faculties in Catalonia. The main activities of CAPCIT: to analyze and to study and evaluate the situation of science in Catalonia, and we provide a year policy brief about the state of science in Catalonia. So this is, let's say, a permanent analysis of the state of science. Then the most important part, I would say, the policy reports that we produce, and we try to give different formats so that we can reach all parliamentarians that are interested in this matter, and also the society. So we try also to be a speaker from the scientific and technological community, not only to the legislator, but also to the society, where recommendations are formulated and various alternatives are envisaged. Usually twice in every legislature, the CAPCIT chooses a number of topics. So for instance, we now finished to work on 4 topics: cybersecurity, the digital gap on the elderly, generative artificial intelligence, and transportation. And in November, we will have another session, and we will choose some more topics that will be worked on for the following year. We can also propose specific working groups in Parliament to conduct participatory process, etc. Regarding the achievements, I would like to point different achievements that we can see through CAPCIT's work. On the one hand, the delivery of excellent scientific input. We provide policy reports, and although it is very hard to find a way to measure our impact, and that's a bit what I will talk about at the end, we do see how we reach parliamentarians. For instance, we just received one of the policy reports that we had asked a given university to work on, digital inequality and later life, so about the digital gap on the elderly. And at the same time, within the Parliament, we are starting to draft a bill on the elderly. So actually, this report will go to the parliamentarians that are participating in the drafting of this bill. So can we talk or measure this impact? It is difficult to say what's the impact, but what we know is that we have a very good report, and that we have been able to channelize it to the members of Parliament that are working in this subject. So I think that's one example of how we reach members of Parliament. Something very important too, building mutual trust between the scientific and the technological realm and the legislative one. In CAPCIT sittings, it's not only about what topics that we choose to inform the legislator, but it's also a moment we have to discuss among us, and this means one member of each parliamentary group and the members that represent the scientific and technology community. So this is also a very important aspect of the meetings. We, of course, try to promote the diversity of scientific and technical opinions and alternatives. And we do that with a very strict, let's say, process to attribute who will be working for a particular policy brief. I didn't mention that, but we do not have the scientifics in-house within the Parliament. So what we do is either through our external members that are part of CAPCIT, or directly talking to particular institutions, universities, we ask them to work on a particular topic. And we try to be diverse, territorially speaking, taking into account the private, the public sector, etc. Something that is also new within the new traineeship program, we try also to build a relationship with universities. We want to tell universities that EA is also a professional path. So being a scientific and a technological person who works on technology can also mean that you work for the public sector, and in particular you work for as an advisor to Parliament or to government or to other governmental, let's say, levels. And that's what we are starting to build from this year, this relationship with universities, and so that Parliament is more visible within these universities and that we get a cooperation with them. And of course, to collaborate with other organizations. Specifically, we do that through EPTA, so with other institutions in other. What are the challenges? From our perspective, We are within the parliament, so we connect quickly with members of parliament. So we know quickly who is working with what. We can anticipate, in this sense, who will be interested in a given report. But still, it is hard to measure impact. For instance, it is nearly 2 years ago that we presented a policy report on Barcelona airport, because there has been for years a discussion about how to enlarge the airport. And it is now that the discussion is taking on governmental instances and on the legislator. So how do we measure that? We know that report has been read, has been taken, but it is hard to measure actually that impact. And maybe another challenge I would say we have is reaching a wider audience. So our aim is not only to make a difference within Parliament, and that we know that MPs working in a specific topic are informed, but also that this work serves to the wider society, and also how to bring in this society is also another challenge. So that would be the presentation of how do we work, and I'm very happy to later on answer any questions you would have. Thank you.
Thank you, Clara. I think you're all getting the idea that many of these structures are organized and structured in a very different way, and they have different roles, but the objective is how to help the drafting of specific laws based on the best knowledge available. I think our last presentation is going to be from Izaskun Lacunza, who is from the Oficina C in Spain. And I understand you have been established quite recently, actually. So the floor is yours. And then after you've finished, I'd like to open for questions and answers and clarifications that anybody may want to have.
Thank you so much, Professor Quintanilla. Hello, everybody, dear members of parliament, dear colleagues. I'm Izaskun Lacunza, and I am one of the coordinators of the Science and Technology Office at the Congress of Deputies. We are indeed probably the youngest at the EPTA network, and Antonio Moñiz was asking me for an impact story of our office, and I would say that the biggest impact so far of our own office is our existence. I mean, it was only in 2021 that we achieved to have an office in Spain, and we thought it would be a good idea to share our journey because it may be of use for the Portuguese experience as well. Okay, so I told you that we were born in 2021, but the pregnancy of the office was almost 4 years. We started in 2018, and I think it's a pretty nice story of how a civil society movement can actually affect change in the legislative process. It was our research community in Spain from very many different institutions in the country that were calling for a science and technology office at the Congress. At that time, I was working at the Spanish Foundation for Science and Technology, which may resemble a little bit to the Portuguese Foundation of Science and Technology, and we supported very much this civil society movement calling for a science and technology office in Spain. Just for you to have an idea, it was 15 legislatures in Spain without a science and technology office at the Congress. So my first message probably is that it's never too late. And the other important message probably is that we achieved to have a consensus at the core of the office. It was not only a consensus from the research community that there was a need for this office to happen, but also within the Congress, we achieved a consensus among all the parliamentary groups, which is, I think, it's at the core of our success as well. So our model, Professor Quintanilla was saying that there are many different models, as many as offices probably. In our case, we have an agreement. The foundation I work for, the Spanish Foundation for Science and Technology, has an agreement with the Congress of Deputies that will be renewed every 4 years. We are 9 people at the team. It's 2 scientific coordinators, one of them being myself, and 2 clerks at the Parliament, which is of essence, of course, to understand the dynamics of the Congress. We also have 4 science advisors. 2 of them are here today with me. They are all PhDs, and we have a communications officer, so a team of 9, just to have an idea of how the model could work. What's our role? I mean, again, it's very easy to say, very difficult to achieve, as my colleagues were saying. We offer scientific advice to the Congress of Deputies of matters of their interest. And we facilitate a dialogue among 2 communities that usually are not so close together. We want to become a trusted source. I think it was our Dutch colleagues that were saying that there are many different sources of information for MPs, and it is not that the information is no good, but we know that sometimes it's very difficult for them to actually decide which is a good source of information. And we want to become a good source of scientific information for the Congress of Deputies. And this is very important. We are honest brokers. We do not advocate for any particular policy options or anything like that. This has been said many times, but it's never enough. We want to contribute to the policy debate and to the political debate, but we don't want to interfere. And this is very important because, as said, we need to achieve a consensus about all the parliamentary groups that we are of use. How is the architecture of our office? Because we are 9 people, but we, of course, are not alone. We have a scientific advisory board with representation of the main scientific institutions in the country, from research councils to universities, research societies, and so on, up to 12 seats. And it is together with them that we propose every year a number of topics that the scientific community considers of interest for our parliament, because it's going to be important for the Spanish society in the midterm. The EPTA network, of course, we participate in the network, and this has been extensively discussed already, so I will jump in. How do we work? We have put together what we call the C method, and basically we try to be as transparent as possible in the way we offer our scientific evidence to the Congress, and this is why everything is published, and this is a diagram, but this method has over 100 pages, I believe, that it's constantly updated, so that we make sure that the way we work is absolutely transparent. In a nutshell, what we do is to offer a list of topics to the Congress of Deputies, to the board to be exact, and it is them who decide out of our shortlist which are the topics that we will be working on in the coming year. Once we are commissioned with these studies, we start our work that lasts around 4 to 5 months. And basically what we do is an extensive literature review, not only publications and scientific publications, but also policy documents, what are the laws about it. And equally important, we run around 20 interviews with key researchers on the topic and key analysts on the topic. These interviews are of essence because they allow us to get all the tacit knowledge and all the information that sometimes is difficult to gather from by only reading. And once we have gone through a very thorough process of different versions inside the office, these reports are reviewed by these experts that we interview, so that we make sure that everybody is agreed. So in a way, we are putting together, if you will, some sort of collective intelligence that we offer to the Congress. Once these reports are published, and you have here a number of topics that we are working on at the moment, some of them are already published, some of them will be very soon published. By the way, you know that we had national elections in Spain this year, so all this, there are some papers, some reports that are waiting for regular parliamentary work to get started. But once we publish these reports, that we try for them to be as short and as easy and as digestible as possible, and also as interdisciplinary as possible. What we do is to present them to the Parliament. How? We do it, of course, but all the reports are published, and what we do is to present them in public hearings in the Parliament, such as this one, if you want, in which the experts that we have worked with, together with members of Parliament, are presented with these reports. This is one of the ways we present our work, but also we do close dialogues between members of parliaments and researchers, and Oficina C somehow facilitates this dialogue. And these are closed meetings in which I think we can say that we create a nice atmosphere in which an honest dialogue between members of parliament and researchers happens. Just as interesting, by the way, to members of parliament as for researchers, because researchers are sometimes a little bit far away from the policy debate, and we think that it's of benefit also for the researchers to get to understand better what are the worries of the parliament. We also have a nicer scheme, if you want, which is a pairing scheme in which we put together one researcher with a member of parliament for 1 day and a half or something like that. This is less hard science, if you want, but we have realized that there are many prejudices between the research community and the members of parliament, and it is, a nice way to get to know each other a little bit better. Now, about impact. These are my 2 slides, I promise. It's been said already how difficult it is to actually measure the impact of the kind of work we do. This is a very small slide, but it's just to show you that we have a strategic plan that somehow ends up in a wonderful world, a new ecosystem in which democracy is stronger, in which policy making is always based or informed in research knowledge. I mean, we are aiming big, and this is very difficult to measure. But we try. So the first message is this one. It's a long-term, it's a cultural change approach, the one we are having. So we don't want to make the mistake of being too short when measuring impact, downloads, and things like that. We do measure downloads and visits to the reports, but we also want to try to analyze the qualitative impact of what we are doing, which is the difficult part. It goes from monitoring the parliamentary debates and try to see whether we are having an impact, whether we are being cited or not. We are, by the way. We also like to hear what members of parliament are saying. Sometimes it's in the stairs of the parliament and somebody says, I loved your report on cancer, and this is already an impact. And I would also like to raise, especially for the members of parliament here, the impact that this office could have on the prestige of the parliament. Because, I mean, we've witnessed this very much. I mean, we go to conferences of topics that we are working on, research conferences, and we go there and interview people on behalf of the Congress. And, I mean, our researchers are completely astonished that there is an interest from the Congress of Deputies to actually get to understand better what they are doing. We will, of course, as soon as we get restarted with our work with the Parliament, we want to run some focus groups with members of Parliament to better understand whether what we are doing is of use or not. I mean, we were just born, as we said, and we are trying with these kind of reports, but we are very happy to change the strategy if our members of Parliament ask for something else. And this is about it. Thank you very much for the invitation again, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Well, let me thank all the speakers for the very accurate and condensed way in which they provided all of us with some information about how their structures are put together, what kind of work they do, who asks for that kind of work, who are the people that are actually interested in finding information in this particular way, and also, as you say, the difficult task of measuring the impact of the work that you do. I wanted to include that in the subject because I think it's not easy to do, but I think it's very important when trying to figure out what parliaments value in terms of the kind of work that's done. I would like to open it up now to all the others who are here this afternoon. We have some time. I know the first question is always hard, but I'm going to see if I can provoke somebody to ask a specific question. There are several members of parliament here with us, and so I'd like to see if they have challenging questions or not so challenging questions, just clarification questions about the work that you do. Deputado Porfírio Silva from the Socialist Party of our Parliament.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks for all the presentations. I have just one single question and a brief one. Talking about impact, several presentations talked about the impact of the work of these groups, teams. I would like to hear something about the impact on the quality of legislation, because parliaments are legislators, members of parliaments are legislators. It's fine to hear about the improvement of our scientific culture, our openness to the world of knowledge, etc. But there is some metric to see the impact on the quality of legislation because of your work. Thanks.
Former Member of Parliament, Mr. Patrick Pereira.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and everyone. Thank you for all the presentations. I have basically two questions. One is related to a topic which was mentioned by several speakers about trust and independence, because it's very important as an asset for this institution to build trust and have independence. And this raises an issue of funding. In some cases, this was mentioned, the Dutch representative mentioned, but I'd like to know, particularly when it's private institutions, if I understand correctly, the representative of the US Government Accounting Office, it's a sort of private institution or not, but if it's public institution, it's easy. But if it's private institution, it was important to know how they are funded, because this is related with independence and trust. And my second question is related with the topics raised, because topics can be more or less consensual. If we speak about AI, it's consensual. But they cannot be consensual, and they can be divisive across party lines. For instance, I could give an example of a topic which is very hot in Portugal at the moment. It's the first time we have a petition with more than 300,000 signatures about a specific measure on the state budget. First time ever in Portugal. Of course, this could be discussed by an entity like this. So what is the impact, social impact, the environmental impact, because it's a tax on something that has to do with environment. So the selection of topics is very crucial. In the last presentation, I heard that you present to Congress the possible topics and they choose. But in other interventions, it was not clear for me how this selection of topics is done. Because, okay, only consensual topics like AI, or other divisive topics. So how does this selection is made within your institutions? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take another question? I think it's João Claro. No? Yeah. From SES.
Tiago Santos Pereira, from Center for Social Studies at the University of Coimbra. I have two questions. One, I think partly connects with one of the last questions, which is the balance. I think there are some different models across TA offices in Europe and elsewhere. The balance between doing prospective work, in the sense of, for example, discussing the potential impacts of artificial intelligence 5 years ago, versus discussing what's really on the agenda of parliamentarians. And so the extent to which you see the role of the offices in direct support to actual legislation versus to opening up issues for future agenda of parliaments. And the second question has to do with the methods. I think you didn't speak so much about methods in the presentations, and I think one of the elements that has been remarkable about some of the work in technology assessment offices has been the emphasis on the participatory methods. And of course there are the models which are more participatory and others which in a way are more based on internal staff. How do you see those differences regarding, does that depend on the actual culture of local parliaments, or is it something that has more to do with the direction of the offices themselves? Thank you.
Thank you. I think all of them are pretty big questions, so I don't know who wants to start answering them. Sarah? I think there's a microphone somewhere that you don't need to go up to the... is there a microphone? Yeah.
Since it is that somebody asked about us directly, I will start. Specifically, the first question was about the impact on the quality of legislation. We feel that enhancing the knowledge of the policymakers and the lawmakers does improve legislation. I think in our sustainable chemistry TA, we saw a direct correlation where they took the potential policy options and decided which of those worked for them and put them in the legislation itself. In other cases, it may be less direct, but we know that by answering questions and by providing them with detailed information, we're increasing their knowledge base and hopefully increasing the effectiveness of the legislation. For the question where it was asked specifically, in the United States, the GAO is actually a public-funded institution. So we are funded by the Congress. They decide on that annual appropriation. We're a large group compared to the people here, a medium-sized federal agency in the United States, and I don't recall how much money is spent on us. I know it's publicly available, but our TA group is within that organization of, I'd have to look it up, 150, 60, something like this people within that group, and so it is public. With respect to the topics raised, at least in our case, the topics can come directly from the members where they ask us often via a letter, an official letter, or even put in legislation requiring us to do certain work.
Sorry, Sarah, from members of Congress.
From members of Congress, that's right. It's a little bit nuanced in the United States. It must be a member of the federal Congress. It cannot be somebody from the states. So maybe the state of North Carolina or Illinois cannot work with us directly. They and others may work with their federal Congress person to have that information come through to us. With respect to how we treat that in a balanced fashion, the United States is pretty divisive right now. I don't know that our politicians get along. And so the idea of a topic being consensus-based can be challenging. When it is mandated through legislation, we consider that fairly consensus-based. But when it comes through on a request, we have a series of protocols to manage those requests and put them in a priority that's based on a framework and not an individual party or an individual stature. So it's kind of a complex framework. It's, again, available, but we do have to follow that framework for who gets priority in our work. We're considered to be a limited resource. And with respect to our methods, we often do experts, less participation. We're a very large country, and so to survey or have focus groups with our members can be difficult. We do it when it is selected, when the topic necessitates that type of methodology, but usually we have the topic drive the methodology as opposed to a particular institutional culture or a country-based culture. So our methodology can vary by topic.
Thank you, Sarah. I think Clara had asked for the floor, so Clara.
Thank you. I also wanted to say thanks for inviting me, because in a few minutes I will have to leave. So I wanted to take the opportunity to answer a little bit some of the questions which I think have something in common. Until now, we were always deciding topics that were not directly connected to initiatives in Parliament. So it was more of this perspective, let's say, investigation. This connects with the idea of what's political or what's not political. It's easier to find an agreement between very different parliamentary groups if the issue at stake is not something that it's debated right now in Parliament. But at the same time, of course, the impact you get when you work in that fashion is more difficult to see. Maybe you see it in 2 years. So what we are doing until now is actually going to change, because that's what we have seen. We have provided information on topics that was easy to agree on, that somehow we have seen that have had an impact in a given committee, but we did not reach that goal that Izaskun mentioned, this perfect goal, that information is right on the time to deliver the best legislation. And this is connected to the first question, the impact on the quality of legislation. If we want clear impact on the quality of legislation, we have to also provide the information in a much faster way and connected to parliamentary processes that are happening now, not maybe in a year, maybe in 2 years. So what we have been doing is in CAPCIT, among all parliamentary groups and the outside members, let's say, of the CAPCIT, agreeing together on topics. We sit together and we discuss different topics. We vote on them. Here the votes are from the parliamentary groups, and that's how we proceed. And this has not been a problem from a political perspective, because there has always been an agreement. But on the other hand, it's hard to see this quality impact that was asked at the first intervention. So I think that many of the offices have to deal daily with this dilemma. Should we inform on what we think is important, on what's coming? Should we be novel in providing information that we think Parliament doesn't have, and it's something that will be very important in 1 year? Or should we provide information on a very specific topic they are working on right now, and maybe then see this impact? So as far as CAPCIT, until now, it has been pretty much the consensus-based approach, topics that are not far away. We have not been working on the metaverse and other issues that maybe from our colleagues in Norway have been working on many years ago. But at the same time, we're not hot political topics at this point. So that has been the way we have been working. but we have awareness, especially with generative AI, the work we have been doing around the EPTA conference, that the Member of Parliament would like to have this other part of the work, a work that is delivered more specifically to initiatives that are taking place right now. I think I could take a little bit all questions. We are public, of course, so I cannot answer the private question. So I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clara. Yeah, Beatles. A microphone over there. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. I'll be very succinct and short, I hope. Quality of legislation. For you, I think we have been discussing impact assessment of TA for the last 25 years, and still we haven't reached a consensus amongst ourselves about how to assess the impact. We're still discussing that. But there is a very easy and more complicated answer to your question. The easy is that we're still around. Actually, we have started in 1980, the German Parliament, and we keep on doing it. Every 5 years we need to compete. We're still there. And the same actually with the European Parliament. That's the ones that I can talk about. But I think other colleagues can also share that. So that shows already that there is an appreciation of our work by default. Now, how do you measure that? That's a complex reply, and I will not go into details. We, of course, have our own internal assessment procedures. We are being assessed by the committee of the Parliament. So there is a midterm assessment. There's a final kind of assessment. We have a peer review assessment of the whole, at least in Germany. We do that through the Helmholtz Association. So there is a big kind of assessment and very formal assessment procedure there with recommendations and so on, so forth. And we still try, as I said, to find also our own way of how to measure our own, let's say, impact. But there we have a little bit of a stumbling block. So quality, our impact on the quality of legislation, we don't have criteria for quality of legislation, I believe. So what is a good quality legislation? If we knew that, maybe we would be able to also add our own criteria of how we do that. So basically what I mean to say, apart from a little bit of a joking, there is a whole discussion going on around that, but there is a good assessment as far as we're concerned of what we do external assessment. Maybe just very shortly, there is a consensus decision. In our case, there can only be a consensus decision about what topics to do, because we are under the committee. The committee has representatives of all parties. The same for the German Parliament and from the European Parliament. The reports that are being conducted are published as a parliamentary report, which means that you need a consensus as well to have it accepted, both of the German and the European Parliament. So this can only be done with a consensus. So it's a consensual procedure. And yes, you're right. Sometimes if there is a very politically, ideologically, let's say, sensitive topic, there might not be a consensus even to start work there, which is okay, as far as we are concerned. And it's only public money. It can only be public money. As a matter of fact, the TAB, the German Parliamentary Office, are not even allowed to be part in any other European Union even project around that. So no other money can come into the work of the Parliamentary Office in Germany outside of the parliamentary funds.
Hello? Yes. So coming to the idea of the quality of public policies, this is a very hot debate in Spain as well at the moment, because there is no common agreement of how to evaluate public policies, and it is not systematic the way we are doing it in Spain. So there is now a new law that is asking for public policies to be systematically assessed, and we are in touch with the institute that will be doing that, because number one, there is a lot of research there as well, because you can evaluate public policies in a systematic, scientific way, and we want to be in touch with them. But somehow we are at the beginning of the public policy making. We are somehow inspiring debates at the Parliament, and at some point of the cycle, somebody will need to evaluate it. But I mean, I think that everybody in the world, I would say, it's in our infancy in terms of how to evaluate the public policies. So we need to coordinate a lot of efforts and very many different people somehow addressing different phases of the circle. We are publicly funded as well. I don't think there's another way to do that. It's our Congress of Deputies, the one that is supporting the project together with the Spanish Foundation for Science and Technology. So basically it's a common pot that pays for our salaries. And regarding the topics, I would agree with my colleagues. It is always better probably to somehow try to contribute to debates that are at the core of the Parliament at the moment. But it was decided by everybody in our case that we would start first with topics that are a little bit far away from the public debate so that we could survive a few years. And then once we have a method that is developed, once that we are trusted by all the parliamentary groups, we may consider to somehow interact in the day-to-day debate. And regarding participatory processes, it's in our wish list as well. And again, we are thinking about ways on how to incorporate better public opinion and so on, but work in progress so far.
Oh, yes. Pass on.
Is there time? Okay, yeah. Maybe short on the quality of legislation. One thing we do is that we, every time our parliamentary liaison also measures sort of the impact through citing every time we are cited in parliamentary discussions. So that's one way we can see that we are actually, read our reports. And also with regard to contacts with different politicians, we seem to be well liked or supported. So that's some indications. And I think, but what is still important, I think, and that's sort of a shift we made not that long ago, is to start every project with the impact question. So to start from, okay, what is exactly we trying to achieve for whom? What are going to be the results, and who are going to use it for what? That's very concrete questions, to think more from that part than specifically only topics, because in the past we often had that, okay, there are new very interesting topics in science and technology, and then it gets researched, and then researchers get a bit lost in these very interesting topics. But then in the end the question is, okay, but and now what? So I think that's also a very interesting way of thinking about it, to think about that at the start also in this project. Yeah.
Thank you. Maybe in addition to what Thijs said, a concrete example of the Netherlands. So we are also publicly funded. We do sometimes projects on the demand of the first or second chamber, but we also do our own projects, depending on the work program that we have, but also what we see in society. So for example, 3 years ago, there was a big debate in the Netherlands about data centers and their establishment. Because there were some hyperscalers, also from, among others, Meta, which were about to be cited in a municipality that was only discussed within that municipality. And the only arguments used were financial, economical arguments. But when you looked at society, the concern was more about spatial use, about the water usage and the energy use of these data centers. So we did a project on this, and our main advice was to come up on a national level with an integral plan on how do you want to have your digital infrastructure. So what issues should be at stake there, and what do we want as a society from that? And based on that, decide on what type of data center centers you want in a country instead of deciding it on a municipality level. And that was actually taken up, and now our government is using our report to come up with such an integral policy.
It's just trying to get it clarified. Maybe I can ask while the microphone is coming to you. When we talk about technology assessment, very often it appears to the general public that we are talking about, technology. That is genetic engineering, sustainable chemistry, black holes. There is a lot of innovation also in the area of the social sciences. And so the question is, do you have also in part of your job description or whatever, can you also address some of these innovative ideas that are coming up from the social sciences, which often are not separate from many other things like health and climate and all sorts of things. So that was my question. But let's hear the question from the audience. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So hello, everyone. I'm Afonso Bento. I'm part of an organization called Native Scientists. It's an organization that connects scientists and underserved children all over Europe. And so we are an organization that is focused on increasing the scientific literacy and the scientific engagement with the public. Yeah, and the first question, you stole it away from me, okay? But for a more specific, the one related to social sciences, that I think it's an important issue here. But beyond that, I was wondering if any of the bodies that we heard about today also take into account or advise or comment on how to better communicate a certain scientific development or technology, or what kind of pitfalls are generally related to communicating certain types of topics. So really just a general question about how this relates to your work.
Thank you. Is there another question? Oh, a question here also. Tiago Brandão Rodrigues is a member of Parliament, chair of the Committee on Environment and Energy. Tiago.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your contributions, and thank you, Mr. Chair, for your strength and vision. It's important to the Portuguese Parliament to have people like you with your visionary world. I have a set of questions, and it's a pity that we don't have here a set of customers, of your customers, MPs, that can tell us how useful is your work. It could be very interesting for all of us. But I'm particularly interested in the Spanish case because I strongly believe that is somehow comparable. And your reality, you are a bigger country with different reality. You have two chambers in your parliament. We just have one. But somehow it's comparable. And on the other hand, you are the newcomer. So maybe we can follow you because the difficulties of the others, I imagine that you have already overcome it. But I want to know how is the relationship with the research system in the Spanish case of Oficina C. And on the other hand, you and all of you are exposed to a new ways of lobbying. And I would like to ask you, how exposed are you to the lobbying of the society, and how protected are you to this lobby that we as MPs also feel? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiago. Well, open to who wants to start. The Spanish? Izaskun.
Thank you. So maybe it's worth mentioning, explaining a little bit about the Spanish Foundation for Science and Technology and why it was decided that we were the best fit for the job. We are a foundation of around 110 people, and we do not do research ourselves. What we do is to promote scientific knowledge within the country and science communication to the society. more or less. So in that regards, we don't have researchers, and we connect with all the Spanish system, universities, research centers, you name it. We don't have since we don't have researchers, we don't owe anything to our researchers. So this allows us to get in touch with any researcher from the country that we wish to discuss anything with. Not only national researchers, but also from abroad. So this is the reason, one of the advantages that we had when doing the benchmarking within the Congress. But of course, we needed to find a way to stay very connected to the science system because, it's an advantage, but it can also be a disadvantage. And that's why we set up the Scientific Council. That Scientific Council represents the whole Spanish public system, and they are the ones that help us identify the topics that the scientific community considers to be of essence to be discussed within the Parliament. And also, they are essential for us because they help us choose what researchers are the best ones to discuss the topics with us. So in a way, we are independent. It's not that we want to put our university researchers in the reports, but at the same time, we are extremely well connected to the whole system. Regarding lobbying and such, we do get. We are approached by companies and by different lobbies and so on, and we decide, depending on the topic, whether to interview certain companies or lobbies if the report deserves to pay attention to that. For instance, neurotechnologies. We have been in touch with the only 3 companies in the country that are doing neurotechnology work, and we have discussed with them and have interviews with them. But we express that in the report. These 3 people have been interviewed. So it's something that we decide, but it's always transparent. I would say 90% of the interviews that we do in every single topic, it's basically public research. But we don't want to forget other kind of research and other type of knowledge, because when you want to have a comprehensive report useful for members of Parliament, you need to consider the topic 360 degrees of the topic. And sometimes it has to do with companies and so on. And we do interview them. And regarding the question about social sciences and humanities, we cannot agree more. The way we approach topics is societal challenges. It's not always a technology, the thing that we are assessing. It can be aging and well-being. It can be misinformation in the digital age. And many of our reports, sometimes it's 80% of the researchers that we interview are social scientists and humanists, if needed. So, and I would say that every single report that we tackle has the social view on it. Otherwise, it's of no use. Under lab conditions, it's of no use for the Parliament. So we always take into consideration social sciences and humanities, and I'm sure my colleagues as well. So.
Hi everyone, I'm Tash. I work for the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, and that is in the UK, in Westminster. And I wanted to actually answer your question on the social sciences. So POST had originally started with 3 sciences, and the key topic areas were energy and environment, the physical sciences and IT, and health and biology. And then in 2013, they then introduced a section on social sciences. So we have 2 scientific advisors that focus on the social sciences, but that is obviously a really broad term. So what do? So these science advisors work on topics that may be more related to social sciences, crime, justice, business, and education. But these advisors also work on social science methods. So they work on how can you scrutinize evidence and data using social science methods and software, like, for example, in vivo. And so this is looking at large texts of data and using them to identify themes, and also training with the parliamentary staff. So working with different teams in the houses and asking them to think of ways to engage with social science methods and social scientists. So I think there's a broader range in how you can use the social sciences because, as you mentioned, there's so many ways that social science can contribute to sciences overall. And we also work with the UKRI councils. So there are different councils, and one of them is called, sorry, my stammer. One of them is called the Economic and Social and Research Council. So we work with them quite closely, having 4 meetings every year, speaking about how they can fund projects that specifically focus on social science and how they can fund our fellows. Sometimes they are students and sometimes they are a mid-career level academics that come to Parliament and work on wider projects that are specifically social science related. So I think that's an example of how in the UK we've tried our best to embed social science in post overall. Thanks.
Thank you. I think Clara also asked for the floor, so I'll pass it to her.
Thank you so much. It was just to also provide our answer on this balance between advice on science and technology and beyond that. In our statutes, we are allowed to work on science in the broadest sense of the word. That's how it's written. So we try to have a very broad approach: technology, internet, communications, bioethics, health, environment, energy, dissemination, education, and still non-mentioned areas. And I want to put you 2 very recent examples. Our last reports are on cybersecurity and the digital gap on the elderly. I think I mentioned them. The first one, cybersecurity, when it was asked to work on that, it was specifically asked for a transversal research with human rights. So in this case, the scientific team that we had on one of the polytechnic universities, they were not working with other departments. So what we had in this scenario was one policy report on cybersecurity, and then we will now do another study to include that into a human rights approach. Instead, when we commissioned the digital gap for the elderly, which has, of course, many issues that are not just technological, it was already a scientific group it works transversally, and it has social scientists. So already the policy report goes much beyond the actual digital issue, and it's actually maybe the less important, the digital one, let's say, in this report. So definitely there's interest, there's a solution to that, because either the scientific groups already have the possibility to work in this transversal manner, or we have the flexibility to reach different actors and to provide this wider scope, which is, of course, very important because society is complex and it's more than science. And with this answer, I just want to thank you for inviting me. I'm sorry you'll have to leave, so thank you so much. And I hope you will all have a very fruitful end of this meeting and a very fruitful practitioners meeting for the following days. Muito obrigada.
Let me now, there's a question? No, just say hello, thank you. I want to ask an uncomfortable question. Do you occasionally or often feel that Parliament should have asked an opinion from the bodies that you're involved in and did not, and made decisions without basing it on the most robust knowledge available? I mean, this is an uncomfortable question, but do you sometimes have that feeling? Is there a question back there? Okay, there's another question back there. One question from the back. Yeah, all the way back there.
Hello, so my name is Joana Sá and I'm a scientist. So it was very interesting, the first question from the Portuguese member of parliament, because I think it shows a little bit what was said by the colleague from Spain on how we don't really talk the same language or understand each other. And I thought that the idea of the pairings was very interesting, because from my perspective, it is strange how the Portuguese parliament has very few scientists. So it's for me strange how the chamber feels comfortable legislating on subjects that they know very little about. And so for me, it's the opposite perspective. How can this be done, and how can we guarantee that there's quality of legislation if we don't have solid advice behind it? And I remember, of course, Carl Sagan with the sentence of, we live in the world of science and technology where basically no one understands science or technology. So the questions are twofold. So the first is, and I guess this is for the MPs, if they do not see a need for something like this in Portugal. And the second question, and for the ones who very nicely presented what's been done in many different countries, it's the policy outside of the legislative arena. So many of the policies that are being implemented are not necessarily debated in parliaments and legislated on. They're just being implemented by the different governments. And these two need very solid, or I believe that they need very solid technical and scientific advice. So whether or not you also feel, are you also invited to talk about policies of implementing policies and things like this? And if not, whether or not you think you should, or if your countries actually have two of these groups, one for policy or government advice and one for legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there another question before I pass on to... There's another question, yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Ana Sanchez from ITQB Nova. Just add to something to your uncomfortable question, if I may, which is, if it also happens that you do produce the report and all the available evidence is there, but still the decision is taken without taking the evidence into account, just a curiosity.
Okay. I had several arms that came up. Start in the front here.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Jaro Krieger-Lamina. I'm working for the Austrian Academy of Sciences for the Institute of Technology Assessment. I think, answering your question, that there are all different kind of motives behind passing a legislation, and not all of them rely on evidence. But that's okay. I mean, if you're emotionally involved in a topic, you probably sometimes would wish that the process took another turn and comes up with a different result. But in the end, if we are providing the knowledge and the basics for the decision, for a political decision, it's important to have this, to distinguish the necessary knowledge for a decision from the decision. This was, I think, in a lot of countries quite mixed up during the pandemic situation, when nobody had a clue what to do and was confronted with a dramatic situation where it was necessary to act quite quick in a field of complete uncertainty. And so the first call out from the politicians to the scientists was, what shall we do? The scientists answered. And then there was the situation that some of the politicians said, yes, that's the truth, we have to do this and nothing else. And others wanted to go a different way. And I think for us as scientists, this is the way to go, because the decision is not our part. The decision must be done in the parliament by the politicians. And we can offer all kind of advice. We can show different scenarios. We can show the consequences of different actions, a different kind of regulating a topic. But in the end, of course, you have these situations where you think this could have been done better. But yeah, then maybe it's your turn as a citizen to vote differently next time, to improve this kind of decision making.
Yeah, so there is one thing that I think it's very important, and I didn't want to give the wrong impression with my presentation. I mean, it is not that the parliaments are not being informed by scientific evidence if they don't have a science and technology office in the parliament. I mean, it is not that the Spanish parliament didn't have scientific knowledge before we existed. Please don't get that wrong impression, because this is not the case. I mean, the parliaments, the parliamentary groups, they are advised by their own scientists, by the media. I mean, there is a dialogue. I would say that the added value that we offer as offices is to do this in a transparent manner, in a professional manner, for all the parliamentary groups at the same time. But please don't get the impression that it's either us or anything, because it's not like that. Usually what we like to talk is about an ecosystem where different mechanisms, public hearings, you name it, from even the political groups and so on, contribute to the debate, okay? This is very important. And regarding the frustration that Professor Sorkintanilla was asking about, I mean, we also try to do that, we also try to have that discussion with the researchers that we interview. And we make it very clear that the scientific dimension of problems is one of the dimensions of the very many different, I mean, political values, political opportunity, budget. I mean, there are so many things that enter into the democratic debate, and we need to accept it. Particularly because sometimes, and that we heard it to a scientist in Spain, particularly because we tend to think that scientific evidence will make decisions easier, and sometimes it even makes it more difficult. It's only that there is more information there, and hopefully the decision will be better, but it is not that science is going to make it super easy for the politicians to decide. And I think this is a very important message that we all need to agree upon.
I wanted to agree with both of you, specifically with your comment about uncomfortable legislation, because of course we would have that, but it would be difficult to comment on specifically. And also your comments about the way that you inform your parliamentary members from a transparent and balanced perspective. I think that ties into your question about lobbying. Of course, in the United States, we have a lot of lobbying that happens, and I spent some time working in our legislator's office on a reassignment, and there's a lot of lobbying that happens. At least in our institution, we're pretty protected from that, although we do have the ability to talk to companies or different people who would lobby in the industry. And like you, we also make that transparent in our reports. And so I wanted to echo and emphasize that comment because I think it helps answer your question. And it also gets to a little bit about that science communication, that we emphasize clear, concise science conversation, but in some cases we'll even look at that from what's happening in our federal government. So we have a job where we looked at the ability of our department in Health and Human Services to communicate about vaccines and to teach the country about vaccines, and then had specific recommendations for that entity for improvement, because it didn't go quite as we expected, maybe globally. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention that with respect to your question about being able to talk to our clients and our consumers, we actually do. With the same rigor that we do with our external studies, we do an internal study. We've run it at least 3 times. We call it Voice of the Client. And we intentionally have focus groups and qualitative methods to ask them about if we're performing on a level that they want and how we can improve. And then that's talked about internally within our agency to make improvements. This might be something to consider if you want to stand something up, is making sure you have a mechanism for providing them feedback and so they can have their own continuous improvement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So those are really good answers. So I just wanted to champion them and say that thank you for those contributions. So I'll just share what we do in Post in Parliament. So as we all agree, in politics, there's multiple factors that are motivating these key stakeholders, right? So they have the public demand, they are trying to attain the goals that the public's asking for, and then they have their own party manifestos, and then there's the scientists that are asking them to make change based on the facts. So in Post, we acknowledge that some of the politicians have to negotiate and find balance whilst being in a certain party, but knowing the facts and actually looking at our briefings. So that's one thing that we share, and we try our best to inform parliamentarians of how to effectively scrutinize the government policy. So I think someone mentioned, how do you actually scrutinize policy and actually judge policy? So through Post, we work with some of the staff of the members in how to look at the policy briefings and how to compare it to the university papers and to the public data. So it's about giving them the tools to really see what is the government proposing, how feasible is it, and how does it fit into a manifesto or a wider government a strategy that may have been proposed previously. So just holding them to account, that's what we really do in Post. And some ways that help us to ensure that members are reading our stuff and using it is making use of our board. So the Post board is comprised of members from both houses and also 4 external academics. And these 4 academics are from the 4 sciences and that I mentioned earlier. So it might help you if you have a board as well that can help to champion science amongst their own parties. And the last thing that I wanted to mention is that we utilize the libraries. So we have the Lord's Library and the Commons Library, and they help to answer questions from members. So we ask them to use our briefings in their answers. And we have an event as well each year, wider events where they come in and they speak to us and ask us about our work. So we acknowledge that we can't force them to use our briefings, but we share it and we have feedback and we do studies on the impact of our briefings. So we look at how is research used in all of Parliament through surveys and workshops. I hope that helps.
Well, we're coming close to the end. I think everybody is getting a little bit, hours go past. I don't know if there are any other questions. I had one quick question, which was, do you revisit some of your reports? In other words, does knowledge advance so quickly that you have been required and requested to revisit some of the reports that you do? And I think maybe with that question, I will, maybe Tiago would also like to ask a question. Yeah.
It's very similar to yours. And if you have an open period to advertise your studies or reports and give the opportunity to researchers to give any kind of feedback to supplement the information that you have, or if you receive any kind of strong or negative feedback from the R&D world. I think this is important because when we are playing the political world, it's one thing. When you are doing a report, a scientific report, it's another thing.
Thank you, Tiago. Maybe with those 2 questions, unless there's some pressing question from somebody. Yeah, there is a pressing question from there. I hope it's short before you start answering. Just a quick question from the back. I'm sorry, I'm pushing a little bit, but it's because it's getting late. Okay. So
no, actually, it's a question for what about the Portuguese case? How is it done, and what do you see as hearing all of these examples? Wouldn't you feel that we will be best served with something like the type that was presented here today, just to hear about your opinion?
Okay. That's $1 million question. Anyway, Sarah.
I think I can really succinctly answer both of your questions with the word yes. We can revisit our reports. We can update them, but we also often do them in a series to look at how things have changed over time. And we do give a comment period for experts and other specific federal agencies. So for example, if we do some work that looks at regulations governed by our Department of Health and Human Services, our standard agency comment period is 30 days. For experts, it can vary. Sometimes we ask for them to comment a little more quickly in 2 or 3 weeks, but usually it's about that 2 weeks to a month for comment. And with our federal partners, we publish their responses. So that way you can see their response in our report and it's fully transparent.
Thank you. Any other?
Maybe we can answer.
Yeah, maybe. Tiago, you want to try and answer?
Well, we don't have a formal body here at the Portuguese Parliament, but we have advisors, and we have always open doors to receive the ones that want to give inputs about the different subjects that we are working here. So we, as political groups, political parliamentary groups, or as individual MPs, or within every single one of the committees, we have individual hearings, we have formal hearings, but we don't have still a body like the ones that you explained, but of course that we are here to receive updates, inputs, feedbacks, and I think, and I've been in both sides of this barrier, and most of the MPs pay more attention to the scientific world than the scientific world to what is happening here within these walls. This is my opinion.
No, I think I agree with your opinion, and I think also that I think it was very useful to look at the Spanish example, because you've just formed yourself, and there's a lot of work behind trying to establish something like that. You have to create networks that are solid networks that enhance trust amongst the people that are participating in this. So I'm hoping, I want to end this meeting by just saying thank you very much for coming to share your views, your opinions. I think we will be drinking, quote unquote, from many of the ideas that you have, shared with us. And I think some of us members of Parliament will make sure that this gets a lift in the near future in this domain. So to all of you who we were very lucky to be able to have you in Lisbon with us, thank you very much. Congratulations on all your work, and I hope you have the rest of a very interesting meeting. And to all the parliamentarians, thank you also for being here with us. Thank you. Those who want to visit the building, there are